Welcome to another episode of the InEVitable, your podcast from MotorTrend on the future of the car, future mobility. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? How are our goods and services going to be shipped to us, Johnny, my co-host extraordinaire?
Yes, Ed.
Today we have a very special guest who did a very special thing for the first time ever.
Yeah, this is our 66th episode.
We had someone actually bring a vehicle to us.
And it was illegal for us to drive it, so of course I drove it.
We got in and drove around in a Class A tractor, a truck, something that you would normally see towing a huge trailer down the road. Nikola. And it's powered by hydrogen. It's a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Right.
And it was great.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
They pulled this 13-foot, 15-foot, I don't know, giant truck, white truck, outside of the building. We got a preview. Again, we got to drive around with their head of vehicle platforms, Christian Appel. Nice guy, super nice guy, young guy.
And then we talked to him for like 90 minutes. So check this one out.
Yep.
All right. Here with Christian Appel, who is a German gentleman who's now an American gentleman who works for Nikola, and they make this fancy hydrogen semi-truck.
Well, let's start there and say
thank
you so much for bringing this giant vehicle. This is a first for us in this podcast. We've never had... Nobody's ever bought a vehicle.
We tried. We people have promised, and then last second they don't show. Like we thought Franz was going to bring the Cybertruck, and then he just brought his Model 3 or whatever. So,
but this is not a small vehicle. I think the wizards here at Podcast One who helped do the editing. You might see some clips of us gawking at this thing parked outside of the studio. It's funny for you guys listening. We record in Beverly Hills.
Yes.
It is commercial, but it's sort of commercial / residential. It's a narrow beautiful tree-lined street.
Well, not so tree-lined anymore. No. Sorry.
Yeah, and a Class A semi truck, basically an 18-wheeler without the trailer, without 16 without 12 of the wheels, pulled up here. It's how tall? Like 22 feet, more than that?
No,
how many
it's
meters?
13. A little over 13 feet.
13 feet?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Right. Okay.
Yeah. 20 feet wouldn't fit under anything. 13 feet's about right.
I'm screwball today. They brought it here, and do we disclose that Johnny?
Yeah, I drove it.
Illegally got to drive it.
It's
down
fine.
The street?
It's fine. Okay. Catch me if you can.
I thought you told me you have a commercial's license.
It's just it's with my motorcycle license.
Right.
Same thing. What she doesn't have.
In my head, I'm very licensed, and I drove it fine. It was fine, and there's no gears. The last time I drove a semi truck, I think there was like 18 gears you could play with. So.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, if it must be easy to drive if you can drive it, but ding.
Yeah.
But then Christian drove us around the block a couple times.
Yeah. So Christian, what is this thing?
What is it?
Tell us everything.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me here. This is super exciting.
Yeah.
We really like to show our product and talk about it, but more so show it. And that's why we wanted to make sure we bring it outside and have you guys feel it and drive it and ride in it and be able to see what this is all about. So it's a hydrogen fuel cell electric truck, semi truck. We have a fuel cell in there and a battery pack. So the fuel cell is a 200 kilowatt or 270 horsepower fuel cell. And then we pair that with a 164 kilowatt hour battery. And that goes to a drivetrain that has a continuous power output of 536 horsepower.
And then the torque, which we were calculating, it's 900 newton meters, so 1,800 newton meters, which is like 13. Pull up my converter here. We got to do this. We got to do this in freedom units. So in terms of freedom units, it is. That's not what I wanted.
That's a fancy calculator.
Yeah, it's 664 times 2, so it's 1,328 pound-feet of torque. But with the gear reduction, we're thinking it's times 21.5.
That's right.
So it's 28,552 pound-feet of torque when it comes to, twisting force, driving off the line.
In the lowest gear.
Well, there is no multi-speeds. It's one speed.
Yeah.
It's a fixed gear ratio. And that is actually really nice and gives you a really smooth ride, as well as in acceleration, as well as deceleration during regenerative braking.
So you're talking about the gear reduction from the theoretically. The output shaft of the motor to whatever the single-speed transmission is.
That is right.
So 28,000.
But this is real quick. This is like when the Hummer people say, like, yes, 11,000 pound-feet of torque. You're like, fine, but what are the motors? We don't care about wheel. We care about motor. So motor, it's 1,300, which is a lot. I mean, I don't know anything about trucks, but
yeah. Well, that's my question. It's very impressive, but how does it stack up? How does this output to a conventional modern day diesel?
Detroit diesel.
Diesel Class A truck.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the startability at grade is probably very comparable with a diesel day cab. But when it comes to acceleration, and I mean, 0 to 60 is not really relevant to a truck, right?
Right.
But what is relevant is coming on and
pretty
off.
quick, though.
It is. I think in Bobtail we're like 12 seconds or something. So
well, that's pretty good.
And then fully loaded, we're just under 30 seconds. That's talking 82,000 pounds. But what is relevant is if you're driving on an on-ramp onto the highway or something, it's an advantage to be able to flow with the traffic much better, right?
Yes.
And so that's where the acceleration part of it becomes much more relevant. And the acceleration is much, much superior compared to a diesel day cab.
Okay. And primarily because, well, there's gears to shift, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you get a little delay every time you're going up a cog or down a cog. But but you just described the quantitative, like power output to output. How do Nikola or the class-leading hydrogen electric trucks compare from I don't even know if horsepower and torque are the appropriate metrics, but numbers-wise, how do they compare to a diesel?
I mean, you can definitely compare it in power. I mean, you're very well aware of the torque characteristics of an electric motor versus a diesel engine. So if we talk about peak torque, you also need to talk about when that torque is available as it comes to RPM. And that makes the difference in the acceleration event. When you talk about horsepower, I mentioned 536 horsepower. That's comparable to, if you talk about diesel day cabs, probably more on the upper end of horsepower ratings. So the lower end is probably.
But they've always been very low horsepower, but very torquey. That's the thing with a diesel. It's just all torque.
But you have to shift through all of those gears, right?
Yeah.
And today, I mean, it's much more comfortable with automatic shifting compared to the old days where it was on manual and unsynchronized. That's actually what my grandfather used to drive. So
no, I drove a manual 18-wheeler years ago. Well, it was as you say, a bobcat. That's the term for no
bobtail.
Bobtail, sorry. And just at a proving ground. But yeah, it was like I forget how it worked, but it was like 9 forward speeds plus a transfer case.
You're probably 3 gears to get through a normal intersection.
Oh, at least.
At least. Yeah. So. Well, and the other aspect of it is not only performance, it's drivability, right? Because every gear shift you do on a diesel truck, you have the motion, right? You have the rocking motion of the gear shift, right? And that's something you don't have. And that's one of the aspects when you talk to a lot of the drivers, and I do talk a lot to our drivers and external drivers, our customers, that they really appreciate just the smoothness of the ride, not having interruptions with shifting, and then obviously overall the noise and the vibration is much, much less than you have in a conventional diesel truck today.
So I want to talk about that, like just so overall.
Let's get through the numbers.
The numbers on the truck.
Yeah.
Is it how many wheels how many motors?
2 motors.
2 motors, and where are they?
They are both in one e-axle, so it's what we call a 6x2 drivetrain architecture. So we have one driven axle and one tack axle in the rear. So both motors go into the one e-axle.
Tack axle?
Yeah, it's just a rolling axle. Okay. The second rear axle is not driven.
Also, that's a common setup for diesel or electric, or is this more is this unique to the hydrogen electric?
Well, I wouldn't say unique, but the majority of trucks in the U.S. are 6x4. Or you have 4x2 trucks for local distribution, but most of the trucks are 6x4, meaning both of the rear axles are driven.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you drive the rear axle?
Yeah. This was an early design choice we did. And back then we had the collaboration with Iveco, and we still work with them. But we also used to have a joint venture with them. And we wanted to develop an axle that also works for the European market. And in Europe, all of the trucks are essentially a 4x2 architecture.
Right.
And so you need the power on one axle versus distributed on two axles. Now, going forward, we're definitely looking into 6x4 options as well. But the advantage we have, even though it's a 6x2 architecture, and there's some people that were worried about, the performance of that when it comes to traction. Well, the advantage we have is we have a fully controlled electric air suspension system. And with that is calibrated to be able to fully load the drive axle first before it loads the tach axle. So you will always have maximum traction even though you only have one driven axle.
Which axle is the tach axle, the middle or the rear?
It's the rear.
The rear one. Okay, so
the middle axle is the driven.
And there's no, tractive downside to just not having the rear wheels powered? I imagine there must be some.
Yeah.
That's why you're looking into...
Right.
Okay.
Once you go into the corner cases of very low traction, where it makes a difference whether you have, 4 tire patches or 8 tire patches.
Like the ice road trucker guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
I'm gonna ask a really dumb question, just because I'm trying to. You're scrambling my brains with 6x4 and 4x2. So American Class A trucks, a total number of wheels are 6, right? You have the 2 front wheels, and then you have the 2 axles in the back.
Yeah, well, most axles, so 3 axles.
3 axles.
Most trucks, there's the super singles, so the white single tires, but most trucks have dual tires on the rear axles, right?
Yeah, this is confusing. This is a confusing part. So, but it's 3 axles. So there's 2. There's for steering, and then there's essentially 2 axles in the back.
That's correct.
And in America, the middle one, the first one is the powered one for Nikola's truck.
Correct, for Nikola.
Yeah, but most
diesel trucks have
both of those
back.
are powered.
Yeah,
correct.
Okay, but hang on. And then in Europe, the truck is 4
2 axles.
Only 2 axles,
Yes.
and so that's why. So this allows you efficiencies for both markets.
Correct.
Okay.
I noticed though, because you were showing me the cabin, and I still want to get to like the numbers, like the range and everything like that.
Yeah.
But there was a differential lock, so you're just locking. You're not locking. You're just locking up that single axle.
Correct.
You're not.
That's correct.
Okay. Because I when I saw that,
Not between the axles. Yeah.
My mind was like on the like the AMG 6x6, which had 5 differentials, but there was a lock that would lock the rear axle to the middle axle, basically.
Yeah. We actually, my former company, we worked on that one too.
I've driven it. I've jumped it. It's wonderful.
It is. I bet it is. I didn't.
We'll get to it. We have a lot to talk about actually with your former. But let's get through this. Okay, so 70 kilograms of hydrogen.
That's correct.
What does that mean to an American? Because you have 5 massive tanks, and like 70 kilograms is 160 pounds, something like that.
I aspire to be 70 kilograms.
Yeah.
What? That's
like
light.
body mass.
That's very light.
Yeah.
I can do the math.
I used to be 70 kilograms.
I'm about
It's a good
100.
That was before I moved to the US.
It's a very competitive judo weight. It's in judo weight class. It's a very competitive.
Okay, so that's 154 pounds.
Actually, I don't aspire to be that thing.
that's
78 maybe. 78.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
The reason we use kilograms is, first of all, I would say, the industry isn't that large in hydrogen semi trucks, right? But we use miles per kilogram as a fuel economy number.
Okay.
And what makes it a little easier is that a kilogram of hydrogen has comparable energy amount than a gallon of diesel. So a gallon of diesel is 37.2 kilowatt hours or something like that on average. A gallon of diesel. A kilogram of hydrogen is 33.3 kilowatt hours, I believe, is the exact number. And so it's kind of a bit comparable, where you have a kilogram of hydrogen is about 0.9 diesel gallon equivalent.
But when you say kilogram, hydrogen doesn't weigh anything, right? It does. So if you compress it, if you compress it, there is weight.
Well, it is a very light element, obviously.
Okay. So
but the compressed hydrogen, 700 bar, 10,000 psi. This is the amount, the weight of the hydrogen.
Weighs 70 kilograms.
Yes.
So we have pictures, and you'll see them if you're watching the video. But like massive tanks. Like I remember I drove this is 100 years ago, the Honda FC Clarity, and it had a hydrogen tank, which looked like a
tiny,
like a propane,
like
a propane tank, a little bit taller, like a big 10-gallon propane tank. These are just massive tanks, but it's only 70 kilograms. It's crazy. Yeah, they're these massive carbon fiber tanks, essentially bulletproof, or close enough. And the fuel's pressurized to 10,000 psi, 700 bar if you're into the whole metric thing. And then how much range does this give the truck?
Right. The range is about 500 miles.
Okay.
It always depends on the payload, on the route you're driving, on the driver.
So when we say 500 miles of range, that's loaded with a trailer.
Yeah, that's loaded with a trailer.
82,000 pounds or something, whatever.
Typical, average highway speed.
So as a bobtail, how far can that thing go?
Well, we don't really measure that.
But come on, you must have some
Well, over 700 miles.
Okay, wow.
On bobtail.
It's shaped like a barn, Johnny. It's not going to go that much.
Yeah, but there's a lot. There's a lot of hydrogen.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people don't get this with hydrogen. Like, what does the hydrogen do? You're just putting energy into the batteries because it's an electric vehicle, right? I mean, is that true?
Well,
partially true.
Almost.
Okay,
the way I like to explain it is you have a fuel cell that converts essentially the hydrogen and the oxygen out of the air, creates the electric potential, and then it goes through a electrical interface and actually a DC-DC converter. So we modify the voltage level through the DC-DC converter to match the battery voltage level. And then you can think of it as essentially the fuel cell power module, the battery, and then the inverters, motors, and all of the other units being on the same high voltage rails.
But so the battery and the fuel cell work together to spin the motors.
They work together.
Okay.
They can work together to spin the motors, meaning to provide the drive power. But also, let's say you're just cruising along, maybe not full load, or you're cruising along just highway speeds. Then the fuel cell can also power the batteries, charge the batteries.
Right.
So the fuel cell provides all of the drive power you need, and then also simultaneously charge the battery. So the battery is kind of an power and energy buffer, you could say, to some extent.
So sort of like the way like the Chevy Volt worked was like, when the engine turned on, and a lot of plug-in hybrids operate this way, but like, depending on exactly what it needed when it needed it, the battery would either get charged or spin the traction motor, and then the engine would spin the planetary gear set and transmission. So it's complicated. So you can do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Do you charge the battery independent of? No. So there's no.
We didn't include a charge plug because we want just ease of use and operations, right?
Okay.
The way this works is you drive your truck, you pull up to a hydrogen refueling station, you hook up, nozzle, and at the end of the day, that's very comparable to what you do with the diesel today. You fuel up, you're done, and you go. There's no secondary charging operation.
I noticed there was a EV mode, a battery mode.
There was an EV mode, yes.
So in other words, if you run out of hydrogen, which I've done, if you run out of hydrogen, then you have 160 kilowatt hours of battery. Best case scenario that you can drive around on for a little bit.
That's right, and we designed it that way, by the way. So if someone would run out of hydrogen, and we obviously have range estimation, and we warn the user at some point and say, hey, you're really low on fuel, and all of that, but it's designed in a way,
it'll happen.
If you run out, it automatically switches the truck into battery electric mode, and you have the little extra of mileage, you can go, right? And it's not a lot with the amount of batteries we have.
Because of the weight of the vehicle.
Right, and they wouldn't always sit at, 100% SOC,
right.
because we keep them more like at 50 on average.
Right.
And I can talk a little bit more about why that is. But you still get the little extra of mileage, and I've actually tried that myself too. Purposefully run it out of hydrogen and kept driving back to our base with switch back to battery electric mode. But the real motivation we did that is you still are sometimes you face restricted environments where you're not allowed to run the fuel cell. Think about a shop, a repair shop that's not hydrogen safe, quote unquote.
Right.
And there we need to essentially lock out the hydrogen system, but then we can still run the band.
But whatever the reason, you have the option to go hydrogen or battery electric. What's the voltage that you're running at?
We're running around 700 volts nominal. Yeah.
Okay.
On the whole
So,
system.
Johnny, I want to challenge something that Johnny said. He said that it's a big tanks and it takes up so much of the truck. I mean, I looked at the truck. I don't stare at these things all day long. Is it dimensionally that much bigger than a standard Class A diesel truck, or is the equipment?
I just meant the tanks are humongous.
Yeah, but I mean,
tanks,
sure, but the tank and the battery and the motors, it is taking the place of an entire normal internal combustion powertrain and
like
transmission and the fuel and whatever fuel tanks you have for that truck. So I mean, it doesn't look that much bigger, and you are using Iveco as your partner, and that's fundamentally based on a diesel truck, right?
Yeah. So we are taking up a little bit more space today than a diesel truck, and that is mainly due to the tanks.
Okay.
The tanks, just from a package point of view, volume point of view, take up some space. So that's why we have this backpack behind the cab that has 3 tanks.
And normally in a Class A, that would be like the living quarters.
Right.
Sleeping compartment.
In a sleeper truck. That's
sleeper
correct.
Truck. Yeah. So just if you're just listening, it's a big cab. Like you could put 5 people in the cab, no problem. Even though there's only 2 seats.
We put 4 people.
We put 4, but it's okay. It's Beverly Hills. They don't. They're cool. And then where the sleeper part you'd crawl into would be, there are 3 big tanks stacked up in this backpack design, and then 2 more saddle tanks kind of in front of the rear wheels, and then the 2 big battery packs in the middle, kind of like in the center of the spine of the frame.
That's kind of a challenge, though, isn't it? Because it's not a problem in this country. In the U.S., we have the Kenworth's got the engines in the front, and we don't care how long the truck is, right?
That's
but
right.
in Europe, you are
Yeah.
you are very tightly regulated on the overall length
That is
of
absolutely
the truck.
correct.
But then, right, there's some calculus here because European trucking distances they're not like as extreme, right? You country to country, you can do easily in a couple 100 miles at the most, right?
Yeah,
You're not necessarily guys having sleep. They're not sleeping in their trucks per se that often.
Well,
or maybe
most of these trucks are sleeper trucks, and actually the truck we're using here as a day cab, the bones of that is from a European sleeper model. But since they are so regulated in length, that's why there's the 4x2 architecture that we talked about earlier, as well as you have a very tiny sleeper configuration, essentially, compared to the North American condo cabs that have those big sleeper cabs and microwaves, and everyth's bigger and better in the US, right?
Yeah, hey.
So
that's why you're here.
no, but it gives us some advantage because you talked about, is it then bigger the truck or longer or whatnot? Well, utilizing this cab over architecture that you saw in our truck, well, it moves the cab forward, so we can afford having that backpack there without growing the wheelbase beyond what is normal for a US day cab. So we're actually our wheelbase is right in the competitive set, you could say, of a day cab. Right. And then obviously you were in the cab, so you see the other advantages. Yeah. You have a very good view from that cab.
You can stand up in it.
Yeah.
If you're 6'9", you could stand up in it.
Yeah, you can. And the maneuverability is great too.
Yeah. And you can take a nap in it. I mean, Ed and I at one point we were sitting on. It looked like a bay window. Chair thing.
A settee.
A settee. Yeah, but you could easily take a nice nap in there.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just do it. I'll ask you to speak on behalf of all German truck drivers, just for a moment here. Do they look at? There's a Sylvester Stallone movie, Over the Top.
Oh, the greatest!
Arm wrestler, and he drove Kenworth. Do they look at American semi trucks and go, "Oh man, it would be so cool to have one of those with
pipes
in cars, right? The longer the hood, right? The more like you got a V12 in there. Then you go back. It goes back to classic car days.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that a thing? Are they jealous of American, or they look and they go, "That is not efficient." And now they're French for some reason.
Not very efficient.
Right.
Yeah. That wouldn't fit in Paris.
Yeah. What's the appreciation or not at all?
I don't know if I can speak for all European drivers, but
just the German ones.
Let me start for myself. I grew up, right, and actually I got exposure to the US pretty early. My aunt moved to the US when she was 18. So I got to the US the first time when I was, I think, 6 years old, and I just loved the US trucks, right? The nose and the big steel pipes, and
coolest, yeah.
It's just so cool, and the extra lighting, which you can't do that stuff in Europe, right? It's all regulated. How many lights can you have? And
go to Japan.
So I think, at the end of the day, it's often what you can't get, right?
Yes,
is most desirable, and I think that's a little bit of it. At the same time, I do think that since the regulation is so tough in Europe, overall length and so on, you got to be much more creative and maybe more technology driven actually.
Right.
So these modern trucks over there, I mean, they're fabulous. I mean,
and I also noticed we were again driving around the mean streets of Beverly Hills, but there was like a pretty tight thing. And I'm like, as you were driving, I'm like, wow, there's no way look at that. He just weaved his way through it.
It was a pedestrian crosswalk, but it had
like a flag.
It had a flag in the center of the road, and then it had like a cutout portion and a tree and a sign, and he just kind of weaved right through it.
So they're much more maneuverable because you can see basically where the wheel is. You're sitting on the wheel, the front wheel, whereas. Again, on
Stallone couldn't do that.
Condo cab, which is I love that term. That's got to be 8 feet, 10 feet.
Yeah.
And it's a bit, so that you couldn't do that as gracefully.
Well, let's go back to talking trucks. Speaking of things you can't do or forbidden fruit, and possibly I don't even know if this is true. Direct competition, the Tesla Semi. Have you spent much time looking at it? Is this? I know the range is comparable, right? They're claiming 500 miles, and they can tow
different versions. I think they announced. Yeah,
they can tow an 82,000 pound trailer. That distance. They have some in operation at a potato chip factory.
So they're only towing like 42,000 pounds. Potato chips or something. Yeah,
but and then controversially,
corn chips.
They have a center seating position, which people like lauded, but I also think is insane. If you're trying to. This is a McLaren F1 issue. How do you pass people when you have to get half the car over the road?
Again, that's one of those things where I think the CEO, whatever his name is, said this is what we're going to do. And the engineers are like, okay.
Right. Anyways, comments on, first of all, is the Tesla Semi any kind of competitor? Or
does it keep you up at night?
Yeah.
Well, the way I think about this is, being a Tesla or others, it's great. It's great that we have multiple companies pushing into this industry, because this is not a easy to decarbonize industry, first of all, but there's a big lever. There's a lot of trucks running on U.S. roads, European roads, all over the world, right?
Yeah.
And it's a big carbon footprint, and so I think it's great the more companies are pushing into this direction, whether it be battery electric, which we also do, and there's definitely a market for that, or fuel cell electric. I think fuel cell electric is going to be necessary to cover all the range of Class 8 trucks you have today, right? And that's why I invite everyone to help decarbonize the industry. And there's going to be more radical approaches. We took a different approach too with the cap over architecture that we talked about. And there's always benefits and drawbacks for every change you introduce.
That's interesting because your approach seems more thoughtful for the European market, whereas I haven't seen Tesla even talking about. They're kind of focused on Tesla Semi here, not.
I have no idea. I don't pay attention. So. They're not good at communicating. Let me ask you a question though. We all like the way condo cab. Semi trucks are all cool. Doesn't matter what they're. But
I love semi trucks.
If you like a condo cab, couldn't you just stuff the nose with the tanks instead of backpacking them behind the cab? Couldn't you just cram 3 of them?
Hydrogen as a crumple zone. Amazing.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Those tanks are pretty sturdy.
Carbon fiber, right?
Yeah,
but they're bulletproof.
It's plastic liner and then carbon fiber wrapped around.
10,000. Anything that can hold 10,000 psi is.
But you want? I was just joking. You do want a crumple zone to form.
Well, on a semi truck, it doesn't matter what you hit. Nothing's. They're going to crumple.
So I mean, for sure, we're looking into in the future for this market specifically, talking about sleeper trucks.
The culture of
condos.
U.S. truckers.
Yes, I mean we're definitely looking into what could be our next step in terms of next generation of product. Pushing more into the longer range, probably, and looking into what is the demands for the U.S. market specifically.
Well, on that note, is it as easy as just if you just stacking 3 more? Could you? Is it modular?
Oh yeah, I mean we have all these tanks are connected through a rail system, essentially a fuel rail,
right?
And then supplied to the fuel cell power module, and we could in theory just keep adding tanks,
right?
But you keep adding weight as well, and these applications are payload sensitive. And you also, if you just continue to stack them up behind the cab, I mean, there's also a point about the driving dynamics and
Sure.
you know,
But I was
rollover
thinking
and so
about
on.
Australia, and they have this road
Yeah.
train culture, right?
Yeah.
Where they're just hauling across this giant continent. You stack 3 trailers behind
Yeah.
you, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
You're not making any turns.
We,
You're just,
we could, you know, you could increase the wheelbase, stack up another few tanks. You could absolutely do that.
Let me ask what might be an obvious question. I think I know the answer, but like, yeah, 10,000 psi. But what if you made the tanks 20,000 psi? Can you pressurize? Is there a point where hydrogen can't be pressurized past? It
No,
turns solid or something?
Now, there's really what we're looking into in the future is so we're all in now with this product for 700 bar, 10,000 psi. For the future, there's lots of technology being developed for liquid hydrogen onboard storage. I mean, liquid hydrogen today is being handled a lot, but for mobile applications, having the right storage tanks there, as well as cryo-compressed.
What's different? Like what's different about liquid hydrogen?
Well, it gets cooled very much, and then you have it in liquid form in tanks, and then
Is
at
that
that point
that's better?
Well, it's unpressurized, right? So you can actually reduce the weight of the tanks. You have more hydrogen you can store in the same volume, but there's other challenges like, you know, the vacuum you need to keep it cool, and the associated boiler if you have with liquid hydrogen.
how cold are we talking about?
Minus 200
Celsius?
So you're getting down in the kelvins. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Cold.
very
But
cold.
but that would make the tank smaller and lighter.
Right.
Got it.
And those are the things we're looking into, talking about the future, the next products, what are the technology
But
advancements. That's one
you
of
but
the
like
things
you
we're looking
can't
at.
pressurize gaseous hydrogen more than it's not practical to
No,
do it past
no,
that.
no, you
Okay,
can't
there's
practically.
some engineering reason. Somebody thought of that. Okay.
Okay, so all right, we've covered the range. We've covered sort of a little bit on Tesla.
Where do I get hydrogen?
Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about. So, the first question is: you said it's comparable to filling up. Volume-wise, you're comparable to what a diesel truck can carry, and the refueling time is same, similar.
It's
dramatically different?
comparable, yes.
Okay. Like how long? How long from empty tanks to
70
ready
kilograms,
to
yeah.
go?
I mean, the truck can do a full fill in 20 minutes or less, but it always depends on the dispenser as well. And that's no different than a diesel pump, right? I mean, there's different diesel pumps out there, and it always depends on the other side of it. So it depends on the dispensing station. But that's what we can do from a truck side today. What we're also working on is we're working with an industry consortium with, you know, all of the well-known players in the hydrogen space, and we're working together to develop a new standard, a new hardware, which is called H70HF. It's 700 bar, heavy duty, high flow, and we're developing this hardware and then also the protocols that go with that in order to actually enable the target of that group is to develop the high flow protocol to allow essentially 10 kilograms per minute. And at that point, you would be looking at
7
refueling times of
minutes.
7 minutes, 8 minutes.
But does that matter? Because I always picture like truckers drive a lot
Yeah.
and then they get out and eat, like
Yeah.
or or
Wait,
shower.
10 kilograms per minute, 100 kilograms per minute.
No, it's a 70 kilograms of
10
hydrogen.
kilograms per minute.
so, okay,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
But right, like, does it matter that you can fill up in 7 minutes? Like,
Well, it does matter to some extent. I mean, you are
Why?
correct that there's a mandatory break that
Yeah.
drivers have to do. There's kind of slip seat applications where you continue with a second shift. And there is a certain amount of time you have between. And if you're like we bring this product to market now with the 20 minutes, I think that's very competitive, first of all, and it will allow, or it will not cause any disruption in the operations as they exist. I think the better or more, that the faster fueling times that we're talking about with this new hardware and protocol, they're going to become relevant if we increase the amount of hydrogen storage to just not increase the fueling times
Got it.
proportionally with that. But I do think 20 minutes is probably sufficient to pretty much, you know, serve all of the applications we see out there. Once you go beyond 30 minutes, more towards maybe an hour or something, then it starts becoming impractical. At least for, it always, again,
The
depends on
industry.
the application, right?
Right.
It depends on the application. But for many applications, that's going to be a disruption.
right.
And especially if it seems similar to EV like if an EV Class A truck is a competitor, we think the recharge times are only going to fall, right? Like right now, 20 minutes in a fast state of the art regular production vehicle is you're getting a fair amount of juice.
Yeah, look, I mean, a Hyundai Ioniq 5 on a 350, 18 minutes go from 10 to 80%.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll.
But cars is different, right, than trucks. Just the amount of energy and ultimately the charge power. Right?
Yeah, but it's the only thing we know.
But are you working towards some like driverless future where it's like the truck drives and then like
that's a Wolverine. We're going to talk Wolverine the movie in a little bit. But so this new standard you're pushing.
Yeah.
Is this also this? So I went to the MotorTrend Hive Mind and I said, hey, we got the guys from Nikola coming in. What do you want to ask them? So our man Frank Marcus, who did a nice write up on your truck, said, hey, they just got Caltrans commissioned to build 6 hydrogen stations across Southern California. Is that to this new standard you're talking about?
Initially, so that hardware is still in development as well as the protocol. So we will come out the gate with, as I mentioned, the existing one. It's actually a modified H70 hardware and then also standard. And that's how we're going to build these initial stations too.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, once we have the new technology fully developed and tested and validated, then we'll be able to also upfit these stations as necessary.
Okay, and then 6 in Southern California is a step, but our other guy, Christian, said, oh, great, you guys, I think there's 66 hydrogen refueling stations for these trucks.
No, he said that means we're on the road to 66.
Oh, there will be.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is there how many places?
I think he was making a 50-state joke. But go.
Could a hydrogen a fuel cell trucker stop at in this country currently?
Well, most of the hydrogen refueling stations and pretty much all of them are in California, right?
Okay.
They are for medium duty or passenger cars.
Okay.
So those are 350 bar refueling stations, and they're not necessarily
which is half
compatible to heavy duty refueling. So that is only really a handful of stations today.
And just real quick, this is a pain point Christian and I were talking about. So the Honda Clarity and the Toyota Mirai, I think, are 350 bar, so it's 5,000 psi. And it's only U.S. Everywhere else in the world, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are all 10,000 psi, 700 bar. So it's like a bit of it's non-compatibility for no good reason. It's just this country picked that standard, and for commercial vehicles, for passenger vehicles, and so the commercial trucking industry going hydrogen is going to be 700 bar.
At least most of the people you talk to in this industry take the approach by now to go for 700 bar.
Yeah, it just makes more sense.
Yeah, so
you can store
today,
twice as much in the same space. So.
Well, yeah, I mean you can store more hydrogen in kind of the same volume space,
exactly,
right?
right?
So exactly. So yeah, today it's only a handful of heavy duty stations that are out there, but that's exactly why from the beginning we included not only the truck in our development plan, but also the infrastructure, right? And so we are working with a lot of partners on the infrastructure part, on the hydrogen production, the distribution, the dispensing. We have the partnership with Volterra, and together with them, we will build 50 stations or more throughout the country. But that's gonna need to happen in parallel. People refer to the chicken and the egg, right?
Oh,
I mean, you have to have both. And there's obviously a very famous example in the recent history on electrification that showed you that was, one key of success is developing the product, in this case the passenger vehicles, and the infrastructure to charge, right?
Just supercharger network and then charge other people to use it. That's a good idea.
And very similar to what we're doing. I mean, we're aware that we cannot just push a truck out there. Yeah. That's not going to work. Yeah. We have to work on the infrastructure piece as much, right? And at the same time, it's very capital intensive to build up that infrastructure. So that's why we're pulling in partners, a lot of partners, and do this together, because at the end of the day, you cannot do something like that if you don't have the right partners with you to support.
Okay. All right. So here comes the tricky question.
Which way are you going?
I'm going here. So, we're talking about decarbonizing. We like that. But who's making the hydrogen? What do you make it? Because if you're burning natural gas or coal to make hydrogen, you know what I mean? Like you're not really decarbonizing. So what's do you guys have a plan for that, or are you kind of like agnostic? Like, well, that's not really our problem. And that's a problem with the hydrogen industry. So I'm just curious on Nikola's take on that.
Yeah, very good question. I mean, you often talk about the colors of hydrogen, right? The different colors you have. Green hydrogen and there's pink and gray hydrogen and so on. So and there's a little different classifications that people use. At the end of the day, I think realistically, in the beginning, you might need to consider hydrogen or at least some mix that's not fully green. And what I mean with that is, hydrogen that comes out of some of these traditional processes.
Yeah, natural gas seems to be the one that people. Yeah.
But then you do a carbon capture or something, right? I mean, there's technology out there and that's considered blue hydrogen. There's technology out there and processes to deal with that. Ultimately, our target is to use green hydrogen.
Right.
And electrolyzer technology is making huge advancements, and there's more and more big projects, and as I mentioned, we're working with lots of partners. But there's a transition period, right?
Right.
And realistically, you have to consider that on the path to get there, right? It's no different with electricity, right? And charging your electric car. I mean, would you not buy a car just because an electric car? And in the early days, just because you cannot guarantee fully renewable power supply.
Some people might. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah,
my point is, you got to develop this industry, and you can't stand in your own way to decarbonize the sector.
No, does part of liquefying hydrogen? Because we know we just had this guy Carl on a Porsche e-fuel.
I want to ask him if he knows him because Carl came from Bosch.
Yeah, he comes from Bosch too. Carl Dums. I believe
Carl Dums,
D-U-M-S.
So Bosch is a huge company. So.
Yeah. But so
400,000 people or something. It's a tiny little company.
But he was saying like, well, look, we have this abundance of energy down in Patagonia that you can't do anything with it except for we can liquefy hydrogen and carbon dioxide and turn that into methanol and turn that into gasoline.
Yeah.
And so we're liquefying this energy because there's no power lines to go from the Andes to wherever. So is that
where people live?
Is that like a plan? Is that one of the reasons that liquid hydrogen's appealing because then
density,
you can ship it?
Correct. I mean, liquid hydrogen is appealing because you can ship it better. You can pump it through. But I think it's going to be depending on geographics, right? There's also approaches to use gaseous hydrogen and pipelines with that. What I think is going to be interesting looking towards the future overall in the energy sector is how are we going to establish our kind of energy backbone, right? And then energy storage and so on. And obviously coming from Europe, I always have an eye on that too. And how can they, in Europe, it's also interesting because in Germany, because we were very dependent on natural gas from certain areas, and
that might be attacking other areas of Europe at the moment.
Don't want to go into that more.
No.
But my point is, it's interesting to think about kind of the independence when it comes to the energy infrastructure, and how is that going to look like in a fully decarbonized world. And I personally think that hydrogen is going to play a role because it's a medium that is pretty good for energy storage and transport, and you can trade it too.
Okay, that's very high-minded. I want to bring this back to some reality. Well, no, so Christian, you are head of vehicle platforms.
Yeah.
You said earlier that you spent a lot of time talking to truckers. Yeah. You've done a great job of explaining the product and all its advantages, but surely you must come across folks who are like, come on, get out of here. Like diesel, it's so easy. But what do you, when you talk to literally, you spend much time talking to like actual truckers and guys who do this for a living. What do they say? What is their pain point? I'm going to assume we don't have a lot of truckers on this listening to the podcast, but let's pretend.
Hey, they drive a lot. You got to listen to
pretend that you're talking to them right now, and this guy's like, "Give me a break. This is not happening." Yeah. Like, how do you sell them? And then let's start there.
Yeah. That's a very good question. So I was myself surprised. So I do talk a lot to truckers. I like to drive our truck a lot, and obviously we stop at truck stops. And since it's different and new, people would walk up to your truck and just ask questions. And one of the most surprising things for me was I expected there was quite a healthy dose of skepticism as well. But I didn't see that much at all. You have those very truckers that have been doing this job for 20, 30 years. They come up and you and they drive those awesome big rigs, as I mentioned, chrome pipes and so on. And they come up and they say, "Oh, is this an electric truck or is this the hydrogen truck?" And you're like, "Wow. Yes, it is." And then they're super interested, and most of the time I spend half an hour or something talking to them. So I think first of all I have a lot of respect for every truck driver out there, because it's not an easy job. It really isn't.
It's really, yeah.
And we talked a lot about decarbonization, and that's what Nikola is about to the largest degree. But when it comes to the truck product itself, the other important factor for us throughout this whole development was and still is the driver, and making a better work environment for the driver. And I think they appreciate that and they see it. And they're actually very interested in technology. So I have yet to come across someone who essentially says, "Oh, this is all crap," and I don't think
for a lot of what you mentioned, right? The truck it's quiet. You don't have the shifting, the rocking motion, right? It's
and the smell of it. The smell of it is something too, right?
And then the torque, the instant torque, and the takeoff when you accelerate.
It makes the job
a lot of
easier.
safety technology and
So my only other experience with a hydrogen Class 8 truck, Ed and I sat inside of the Hyundai version.
Yeah.
Exient. And it seemed to have the screen out of a 2017 foreign market Accent. Yours had this humongous, I think bigger than the Tesla screen, huge screen that was facing the driver. It wasn't like the Hyundai one was just in the center, and you could tell if we put the steering wheel here, they can see the screen. So it does seem like a more luxurious cabin. But what are the truckers you're talking to? What are they like? What are their complaints about their trucks, and what are they liking about your truck? I know you mentioned some of it, but
and I think you also mentioned already a lot of good points. I mean, a lot of it is what comes just with electric or fuel cell electric trucks, as we said, the noise, the smell, the vibration, and so on, and especially on a cab-over architecture. I mean, cab-over trucks were a thing in the U.S. A while ago.
Right.
But they almost went away because how terrible they were executed, sitting on top of that rattling diesel engine, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I said earlier about, European cab-over trucks have come long ways from that. And so once they see our truck, there's maybe this association with that old diesel cab-over truck in the U.S. And once they're coming, into the cab and climbing into the cab, then they realize this is completely different, right? And I think they appreciate that. Again, there's also some drawbacks that come with that architecture. You obviously have to climb into the cab, but once you sit in there, it is really very, very positive feedback.
The sight line is amazing. You don't have this giant nose to look over. But I will say, by the way, this is news to me. I had no idea. I mean, I own a diesel Land Cruiser. And it's a 4-liter turbo diesel. My wife says it sounds like a bus, and it does rattle and shake a lot. And it never occurred to me that. And now I think about it, the Kenworths, that whole thing that's shaking is 3 feet in front of you and is essentially decoupled, right? That's why all these cab-overs they're suspended. Yeah. They're typically suspended over the powertrain to keep them from shaking the occupants to death.
Yeah.
So.
And we have a suspended cab, right? And the engineers, the Nikola team is just awesome. I mean, the dedication that you have there in all of these different areas, and everyone's very, proud of their work. And there's a lot of tuning that went into the cab suspension and also the chassis suspension to make the most comfortable ride possible, right?
Okay. So All right, so you talked about the truckers that you've been selling it to, but I would understand that you're also probably talking to the fleet owners.
Yes.
So
yes.
What are their complaints, or what's their skepticism in all of this? It must be the charging, the refueling.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for the fleets, this is a tool, right? It's a working tool. It's not an item you buy because you like it, right? Necessarily, you need it. It's your tool, and so a lot of it is about cost and reliability. Every time a truck goes down, I mean, that's a problem for them, right? That they need to solve for. So a lot of it is about reliability and cost. So talking to fleets, especially the big ones, they're very excited about this. I mean, they have all of their own goals when it comes to decarbonization, and they're very interested in it. But they also say it needs to work.
Right.
And so I think we're at the point, we obviously started production of the fuel cell truck here recently. We're commencing with the first truck shipments to customers this week. But the proof is in the pudding. So what comes now is we need to prove out that this works. And not only the truck works, but as you said, the infrastructure, the fueling works.
So I imagine, because when I drove it, you had me do it. When you come off the gas, there's regen.
Yeah.
So in other words, the motors are doing a lot of the braking, so it's probably less brakes, and this is probably very important for a truck. So
Absolutely.
you're using the physical disc brakes less, or the whatever the braking system. It's air brakes.
System,
yeah. So you're using that less than you would in a standard truck. And that's probably really, really good. Is the weight about the same? Are you going to go through more tires with a hydrogen vehicle?
Yeah. So the weight of the tractor right now for the fuel cell truck is a little heavier still than the diesel.
Okay,
and
so a little bit more tire.
Really hard on
Sure.
getting that further down. So the tractor weight is more, and
A
that
little
means,
being what, 10%, 20%? Would you say?
well, it always depends on what you compare it with, and there's the 2,000-pound exemption that you have on a federal level for battery electric trucks, and on a state level for fuel cell electric
But for
trucks.
tires, there's no exemption. Yeah.
No, well, for tires, it comes back to the the overall gross combined weight of tractor and trailer, right? So what it really does is a higher tractor weight again cuts into your payload, so how much you can load into the truck, but also tire. Tire wear comes also down to your drivetrain and the torque and so on. And that was actually one learning we had from our battery electric truck. The e-axle is actually even more powerful. So for the fuel cell electric truck, we toned that down a little bit because having so much torque, off the line, and then also power, you can go through tires much quicker.
The tires,
and the fleets are not necessarily interested in
what do they care?
More tire cost, and they're
it's
also
like a burnout, basically. Is it like a slow burnout, basically? If you put that much torque down at the instant roll off, you're leaving more rubber.
I mean, when we were driving earlier,
and
I did a full tip in, I think you saw the traction control coming in, right?
Right,
so
that's wild.
And we've done our fair amount of burnouts during the testing. Yeah.
So what's the cost per mile difference between diesel, especially here in California? We're seeing diesel spiking over like almost $8 a gallon.
Yeah.
Like, how much is hydrogen, and does once you get to economies of scale where you've got all these H700 HFs are installed. How much is hydrogen versus diesel? What's the cost per mile advantage?
Yeah. So
I assume there's an advantage.
Well, for hydrogen, the cost right now is obviously fairly high. And actually, if you go to the refueling stations around this area, you'll see that it went up in the last couple of months. So
probably
our
just
target
to greedily match the gas prices. But go ahead.
Probably. So our target is for the fuel cell truck to be on parity with diesel on the total cost of ownership, and we always look at total cost of ownership. That's what counts for a truck, right? So it's the truck, the initial purchase price, it's the maintenance, it's the downtime calculated in, and it's the fuel cost, right? Driver cost is not necessarily a difference, but driver retention plays a role. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of turnover in this industry. Turnover meaning, drivers essentially, once a year you go through your whole staff more or less in turnover.
It's a tough job.
And that's something that plays a role, because if you can give a better truck to the driver, there is less retention, and that means
more
less
retention. More retention.
More retention. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And with that, you can lower your cost, your overall cost, right, for a fleet and so on.
Blah blah blah.
So our target is to really go towards diesel parity as the first step, and with that we need to get a better scale of green hydrogen, absolutely. And that's why I said earlier it's so important to play in all of these areas: the hydrogen production, the distribution, dispensing, because you need to be able to drive the whole ecosystem.
Okay. So you are head of vehicle platforms, and we spent a lot of time talking about the hydrogen electric Class A truck.
Because it's sitting out downstairs.
Yeah, I know. But there's and you've mentioned that there is a full battery electric version.
Yeah.
And is it essentially the same product just without the hydrogen? Is it it's an Iveco chassis with batteries, storage batteries, and motors, or am I oversimplifying it?
There's a lot of shared parts, but there's also a lot of differences. And I would also say that in our partnership with Iveco, and in the early days, we obviously took advantage on the parts bin, and it's been a great collaboration with them. And we also used the cab, the core of it, but we actually did develop all of the attached parts, right? So we developed a whole new grille and bumper and so on, and that's different even between the battery electric and the fuel cell electric truck, because the fuel cell electric truck we optimized more for aerodynamics, and we also elongated the front to make space for the larger cooling system that's required for the fuel cell truck. So there are some differences, but there is also a lot of similarities and a lot of parts that we carried over and a lot of learnings we carried over. The e-axle, for example, is the same that we use in both products, even though they might be rated differently from a power level. And so we developed this e-axle for the battery electric truck, and we validated it, and we brought it into production, and that's something we carried on to the fuel cell truck. And then a lot of the auxiliary components and air compressors and so on, there's a lot of commonality.
Sure.
But even in the chassis, right, you have now
there better
tanks
be, otherwise it gets really...
Exactly. So that was our approach, to reuse, quote unquote, what we can. But since it is a completely different powertrain, there was a lot of new development required going from the battery electric.
And
to
how big is
fuel
the
cell
battery
electric.
on the BEV one?
We have 9 battery packs. And it's a
each
total of
one's 80?
a little over 80, and it's 733 kilowatt hours total.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's like, how much range is that at 82,000 pound trailer or
Yeah,
whatever?
it gives us up to about 350 miles of range or so.
Who's your battery supplier?
It used to be Romeo Power, and they got out of business, and we essentially bought the IP and are able to manufacture these packs now internally.
Are they their
pouch
Their
cell?
pouch? Are they like the...
No, they're cylindrical cells.
Cylindrical, okay.
In both products, actually. We use different battery packs and different packs between the battery electric and the fuel cell electric truck, but they're both cylindrical cells.
Okay.
Would we know Toyota's working. They claim in 18 months they're going to have solid state batteries for commercial use. Would that be game changing? Let me ask you this: if it can really, triple the range and half the weight or whatever, does that like kind of like make hydrogen sort of like, don't really need it, we'll just all go battery? Or are you looking at that? Are you aware of that? How far off is that?
Well, we're looking at everything, obviously, and we have both products, and it's always a crystal ball, right, to some extent of what will happen. But in my personal opinion, hydrogen will play a role in commercial trucking, and in fact, in every application that's very energy intense, right, where you need a lot of energy, because hydrogen is a good medium to store energy.
So like boats or trains.
Boats and trains and airplanes, and
airplanes.
there's probably a lot we will see in the future, right?
Yeah.
And heavy trucks. So even if you with battery technology advancing, you still need to recharge. And you still need to provide the power to recharge. And that by itself, especially talking mass adoption of Class A trucks,
can be tricky.
Is tricky, to say at least, right?
Well, how long does it take to charge a 9 battery pack one of your trucks? Is that just overnight or is it longer?
Yeah, we currently have 350 kilowatts charging capability. So it takes about 90 minutes or so to go from 10 to 80.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
2 weeks in a level 1.
Oh,
Okay.
months.
So I mean, there is
that's actually quicker than I suspected. That's not bad. Yeah.
that's like 9 Volkswagen ID4, the low range one, right? 82 kilowatt hour.
82 kilowatt hour. Yeah.
Anyways, in production cars, so in production car manufacturing, the sort of basic math is EVs represent sort of an order of magnitude fewer parts, right? That's roughly like if you have an internal combustion car, factor of 10 reduction in parts for the same EV. Is that the same for Class 8 trucks, or same from a diesel truck to an EV truck, but hydrogen.
I'd also say that hydrogen truck looked like it had a lot of parts.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it more parts complexity?
Yeah, it's battery electric trucks are definitely less complexity. I can't tell you what the factor is of parts between a diesel and a battery electric truck. And a hydrogen truck definitely is also more complex when it comes to parts than a battery electric. So you do have a fuel system, you do have an air intake system, you do have an exhaust system, and so on. So it is comparable to some extent there.
ICE.
Yeah.
Okay.
And battery electric is less complex.
And how much of those parts? Because it's cool. It's the whole cab like tilts forward. It's a very cool truck. But like I was just looking at it, I'm like this to me looks like I remember when I was in Houston at the Johnson Space Center and they had a Saturn V laying on its side. And standing there with my dad, and he goes, "What's a plumbing nightmare?" Because there's just pipes everywhere. So it looks like all you're doing is cooling this thing, right? I mean, is that just like the biggest challenge?
The cooling system, the thermal system for a fuel cell truck is definitely one of the bigger challenges. And if you would talk to anyone else that plays in this space, they would probably agree. And the issue there is that, or the challenge is, a fuel cell has a better efficiency compared to a diesel truck. We're talking a net system level cycle efficiency, so in the truck and through a whole driving cycle of maybe 50%, right? A bit more. And if you compare that to a diesel, that's better. But most of the heat rejection happens inside the cooling system, right? So the cooling goes through the plates in the fuel cell stack, and with that you have to reject all of the heat in the cooling system, different than a diesel engine where you have a lot of the heat rejected through the exhaust. Right. And so that's why it's a bit of a challenge to develop the radiator, and the fans and the whole system to be able to deal with that.
And again, I know Ed and I are lucky we got to look at it, but like the radiator is the size of your dining room table. It's bigger. I think it's about the size of this table we're sitting at. Bigger. Probably, in terms of square footage.
Maybe a little smaller. But.
And the fan looked like something on like a
helicopter.
Piper. No, a Piper Cub. It was a big. I mean, I was like, what is? I couldn't tell what it was at first. I'm like, that's a fan. It's massive. So I know everything's bigger with a semi truck, but like, it just seemed like a lot of cooling.
Yeah.
So
and it was one of those areas again where I think our engineers did a fabulous job in developing the system, because there's a lot of controls that goes into that, and there's multiple cooling systems, and some of them are actually coupled. So we can use the capacity on other systems to quote unquote help out, and we can also use some of the heat we generate in the truck to heat the cabin or heat up, the fuel cell or the battery in a cold start scenario. So there's a lot of development that went specifically into the thermal system of this truck.
And because Johnny asked about it and I kind of shut him down, how far are we? Because I saw the cameras on the windshield, the outward-facing cameras on the windshield. How far are we, and are you guys working on autonomous trucking? Like, are we going to see the? Did you see the movie Wolverine? I think I always tell people
Logan.
Logan.
Yeah.
Logan. The Logan movie.
Wolverine's terrible. Logan, great.
That's DC comic universe. No, Marvel. That's Marvel.
It's Marvel, but it's that weird one where Sony owns it, so like it's a whole thing.
Anyways, I think that for all intents and purposes, unless Blade Runner covered it, that might be the general population's first sort of look at a wide scale of this future that everyone's saying about. Oh yeah, one day autonomous trucks are just going to be roaming up and down the U.S. freeways.
3 trailers, cold-hearted.
Yeah, that's 90 miles an hour, right? Because who cares?
Yeah.
Are you guys? Is that part of Nikola's sort of master plan, or for the future, or how far out are we from trucks driving themselves?
Right. So. There's a lot of startups and companies that are working on that specifically, right? And
you were at one of them, right? Zoox?
I worked with Zoox, when I was still at Bosch,
Okay.
But a lot of it has shifted from passenger car applications or these kind of taxi applications to commercial vehicles, to trucks. So, and I think the reason is because the application might be initially a little bit easier to handle if you're talking about a hub-to-hub application, right? Where you're only driving highway, you don't have the complexity necessarily of a full city, but you're driving highway exit to highway exit, and you have hubs established to go between. So I think this is the future, and we're obviously working, on these technologies as well, and with various partners. Nothing that I can be very definitive right now, but yes, it's an area we're working on, and I envision will play a bigger role. The question is when, and I don't know what you guys think about what the timing will be that we see mass adoption, but for sure we're going to see a lot of kind of demo applications in the coming years, and it's definitely one of the focus areas for us.
But I have a question. I have something I thought about, and I think I talked with a friend of mine who works in big federal government, big idea type programs, but he was saying, like, and it makes sense to me, like, what you really need is you need separate roads for semi-trucks. Just get them away from passenger vehicles, make them autonomous. They can just do their own thing. There's no way, there's no merging. They just goes from, like, San Pedro, Long Beach, goes to downtown. There's a hub in downtown, but it's a road.
Maybe in a tunnel.
Yeah, a tunnel, something like that. No, whatever.
Maybe something like a train.
Kind of like a train, except that there's no loading and unloading. You know what I mean? Like it's just that you load it on the truck. Kind of, but like in a way, or like LA to Vegas, just have like a road for. Has that come up? Does anyone talk about
tunnel?
He's a no. No. But because we're talking about people talk about like a separate road for trucks, or forget about it.
For sure, there's people talking about that and a lot of things, but I mean, it's new infrastructure then you need to establish again, right? And at this point, you need to talk about what would be the best. If you really do a dedicated lane like that, you should talk about maybe some more rail transport as well, right?
It's a non-starter in the U.S.
If you do your separate lane, you're going to put induction charging pads.
This is not Japan. We will be building no trains.
Okay. Check out California's high-speed rail project. Let's keep going. So Nikola, head of vehicle platforms, we've talked about, and you said there's 2. What else are you working on? Anything else? And I will give you an opportunity, this is my next question, to tell us about the origin story, briefly summarize. Like, you guys started out with a production pickup truck. Like, how's that going? Or like, what else are you guys working on?
Yeah. No, we focus 100% on Class 8 trucks and the infrastructure that goes with it.
Okay. In two products, BEV and hydrogen fuel cell.
That's correct.
Nothing. No solar truck coming. No. We're gonna go off-road racing. Iveco does amazing. I love watching this.
DAF.
The big trucks, and there's a Kamaz. Those guys, they go out
off-road truck racing.
Can you get into that? That would be cool.
Yes.
That would be cool. No, no, we're focusing on battery electric and fuel cell electric heavy duty trucks. And what are we working on? We're really working on making this happen. And improving on those products, right? So I mentioned a couple of areas already: autonomous driving, new hydrogen storage technologies looking in the future,
like static commercial stuff, like non-moving, like that kind of stuff. People take battery. Tesla now does Powerwall. Are you guys working on any kind of like a storage system? Or?
Well, only as part of the infrastructure overall, potentially, right? As I said, developing the infrastructure that has to come with those mobile products, with the trucks. And just making the product better, right? There's still some areas we need to work on. We mentioned the weight, so we need to get the weight down. We obviously want to scale up. Right now, the focus is on scaling up the production production of the fuel cell truck. And with that, we need to scale down costs. So there's a lot to solve still there. And we're no longer working on a pickup truck. That was also not the first product. We started out, Nikola started out, the vision was a fuel cell electric truck and the hydrogen that goes with it.
Okay. And that all ended sort of spectacularly. One follow-up question on other product lines. Are you doing anything, any military applications you can speak of? Are you doing anything like GM
defense related?
GM famously, right? They build their Hummer EV, and then the GM Defense is a version of it. You know, it's defense contracts.
Well, nothing I could comment on in detail.
What
but
does
Let him go.
No, I was gonna say that there is a lot of interest from government, different departments to decarbonize, but also if you think about battery electric technology, hydrogen electric technology, if you think about the noise, the heat footprint and everything, right?
Stealth.
There's a lot of interest in these kind of technologies, and then also talking specifically hydrogen. When you talk about how do I transport, store energy, how do I become independent, right? And can create my own fuel, and so there's a lot of interest, obviously, and so there are a lot of potential government agencies that are interested in our products too.
What does fully ramped up production look like? Like how many units a month or a year?
Yeah, where are you building these?
We're building them in Coolidge, Arizona. That's where our assembly plant is. That's about an hour south
near
of
the Lucid
Phoenix.
factory.
Yeah, it's
hour
not
south
far.
Hour south of Phoenix.
Yeah, next to Casa Grande. Yeah,
Casa Grande.
Okay.
Our neighbors.
Yeah.
So then, what do you got? So where do you get the Iveco sends the chassis, or they have something nearby, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we localized most of our parts with suppliers, including the chassis. So that's coming from North America, and it really has the chassis itself, meaning the frame, right?
Right.
Has not. It's very different than the Iveco S-Way truck. Okay. And then one of the items that we still get from Europe through Iveco is the cab itself.
But what are production numbers? Because I know what good car production number. I have no idea about trucks. Like how many? 100 a year, 1,000 a year?
Yeah. So we're starting slow, obviously. So we have just started production a few weeks ago, and it's actually was a very great moment for all of us to get there. And we have produced, I think, now 17 trucks. And number 28, I think, went into the line now, and we're initially talking about a truck a day kind of production. So we're starting slow initially.
Like 200 a year type thing?
Yeah. And then, but that's going to ramp up over the next couple of months already substantially. Okay. So
what is Iveco doing for their best-selling Class A truck? If you could estimate, is it like, are they doing like 2,000 a day or something? Is that what?
No, not that much.
I don't know. Same question.
No,
that's a good question. I would need to look that up. But what we're targeting really, and with the assembly line as it's set up today, we can do a couple of thousand a year. Yeah. And we have a pretty modular concept in our assembly plant. So we're able to scale that beyond that too. But initially what we're looking into is a couple of thousand units.
Now, is this 3-axle truck, is it just North America? Or can you, if I'm in Brazil or China or wherever, can they work in those markets? Or is this one just focused on North America?
2-axle everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I would say the way we developed this product, having Europe in mind and knowing that Europe has one of the most restrictions, it would probably work in a lot of different markets. Right now, we're completely focusing on the North American market. Not only U.S., Canada is a big market, right?
Sure.
And a very interesting market because they're pushing hydrogen very much, and we have
huge distances. People forget that Canada's twice as big as the U.S. in terms of distance.
And we have orders from Canada already too. And there's huge interest coming from there. But yeah, we're focusing on North America, future expansion. IVECO is taking care of Europe.
I was going to say, would you, if let's say this technology goes to Europe, would you build them in Arizona or would you build them in Europe?
No.
Because shipping it would be forget about it.
So we're still partners with IVECO, but they took over the JV that we used to have for the European market. And so they're serving the European market with these zero-emission trucks going forward.
Okay.
And they have their own assembly plant there, which we actually built together as part of the JV in Ulm. And they will produce the trucks there for the European market.
Okay. And is IVECO, are they part of a bigger group? Or are they a standalone company?
They're not like MAN.
No, like Volkswagen owned or something.
They were part of CNHI,
okay.
CNH Industrial, and they just had their separate IPO. So
Got it.
IVECO Group now. So.
Got it. Yeah, because you do see a lot of them when you're in Europe. It's not here. There's no footprint here really.
So
IVECO, no.
Yeah.
So you had at the top of this we talked about how you gave us this joyride in basically the last of your pre-production
Gamma prototype.
That's right.
10.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
that's the last prototype.
The last prototype. We'll go in the museum somewhere someday. And then you're on
the first one. Yeah.
Right. You've done production. You're in 28. Can you talk at all about who some of your customers are? Or has there been any publicity around any big shipping companies or hey, this is great? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of announcements, and those are the ones I can talk about. I mean, everyone in this industry is interested to understand where does it go, right? And what are my options going forward when it comes to zero emission.
I mean, we literally, when we were outside, sorry to interrupt, when we were outside, there was because we were outside this building, and these delivery guy, a UPS guy and a FedEx guy stopped their trucks.
And the Mercedes-Benz service centers there. The Mercedes guy came out because they do a lot of diesel stuff.
And but the UPS guy and the FedEx guy were joking, oh yeah, we got one of these at work already. The guy's like, no. But yeah, so keep going.
Yeah, no, my point is we're talking to all the big fleets, right?
Okay.
But just to name some partners we've been working with for a while. I mean, we obviously have been working with Anheuser-Busch for a while. It's been a great partner. Biaggi is there, Biaggi Brothers, with they haul for Anheuser-Busch. And we've been testing the Alpha units back then, the first prototypes with them, and they're also right now testing the Gamma units again here in Southern California. And we have worked with TTSI as well in the past, so drayage applications. We're working with JB Hunt. There was an announcement about that as well. So
pretty diverse group of customers.
Pretty diverse group of customers. There's lots of interest, and again, most of them, they want to see it work, and that's what I'm excited. In the next couple of weeks and month to just show how this product can perform in the quote unquote real world, right? With our customers, and then we'll see where a lot of these conversations that we're having with all of these fleets ultimately go.
When you need to do some kind of publicity stunt towing beer. I might know a guy who would be interested in
towing whiskey. Yeah.
He's a beer judge. Right?
I used to be,
but you need a CDL.
I'm more of a, if you want to go.
Well, I can drive, no problem.
Yeah. I'll
to
ride shotgun. Yeah.
What kind of whiskey?
Yeah. Bourbon.
I'm a
Kentucky
single malt guy. So.
Yeah. Well, I can fix that because remember, single malt Scotch whiskey is made in used bourbon barrels. So once all the flavors sucked out of it, they cheaply ship them off to Scotland and then they put that junk in there. But we can get you some good bourbon. Oh, I'm just true. It's true.
Making friends.
I'm just no one knows that. Look, Scotch has good marketing, kind of like gasoline, but bourbon's superior, kind of like hydrogen. I think you're saying is better than diesel. So
okay,
we'll school you.
All right, we're running out of time.
Well, let's talk. You got an interesting background though.
That's what I get into. So we talked about Nikola. We talked about your day job. We mentioned briefly that you did come. You spent a lot of time with Robert Bosch GmbH, supporting a ton. Yeah,
but check this out. You worked on apparently the 918, the McLaren P1, and the LaFerrari,
and this thing called the E-Ray, maybe. So. Yeah. Talk about what did you do before you entered the Class A truck field?
Yeah. No, I started my career essentially at Bosch Engineering. which is a subsidiary of Robert Bosch, the big conglomerate of a lot of different companies and
a lot of real nerds,
household appliances.
Yeah, we know Bosch. Yeah.
Did you say nerds? Yeah.
Yes, super nerds. Speaking of, you have a math degree.
Yeah, I do.
You're not I mean, you're an engineer.
I'm not even an engineer.
You're not even an engineer. You're just like a dude who knows numbers.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, I studied math, and physics, Okay. And, but I did work with engineering students. I actually did some teaching and so on.
What type of physics?
Physics was my minor, so it was experimental physics mostly. And
you mean like quantum stuff?
No.
Okay.
No.
You seem kind of young. Was Bosch your first? Was your Bosch your first job?
Yeah, it was. So I started my career at Bosch Engineering, and what we did there was everything that was low volume, right? So a lot of the high volume, VW Golf or something, there's all of the business units at Bosch in the mobility sector that are working on those. And Bosch Engineering was found to deal with, originally it was actually Ferrari was one of the main customers, where Bosch realized that they're not set up to necessarily work with all of these small volume specialized customers, right? And that's where they found Bosch Engineering to be kind of the group that deals with those.
So for instance, for the LaFerrari, which was 499 units and it has this, at the time, incredibly high-tech battery hybrid system. That's what you were battery integration, I assume?
Exactly. And actually that was my whole career was around electrification, right?
Got it.
Electric motors and hybrid systems and fuel cell and so on. And as such it was actually a really great first job because you got to work on all of these awesome applications, a lot of the sports cars. You mentioned a few of them. But we had Maseratis there, and Lamborghinis and Ferraris.
Nice.
But then also other applications. You mentioned the AMG 6x6, right?
Yeah.
That was one project, not myself, but our teams worked on.
Low volume, that was like 60 units or something.
Or like mining vehicles, airport tractors. Yeah. I mean, all of these little, the things
Unimogs?
that little kids...
Unimogs?
Yeah. I think
greatest.
so,
I
think so.
Greatest. Yeah.
No, but it's all of these very fun applications and projects that I was able to work on there. And a lot of it was sports cars, and it was in the days of when everyone tried to figure out electrification of sports cars, right? And the time of the LaFerrari and the P1. P1 is such a fun car to drive, and we did also this super cool program where we electrified an Aston Martin DB9, which in my opinion is one of the most beautiful cars out there.
Yes, we know Ian Callum quite well, good friend of ours. He's helped us out with judging some stuff, and yes, I mean, it stops traffic.
And you started in 2012. That's when you that's the start of your career.
Yeah.
After wow. Yeah. You're old, dude.
I started at MotorTrend in 2010.
You're old.
You started in what, 2008?
7. Old. We've done nothing with our lives.
We've done nothing. I know, yeah. We finally got a podcast after 10 years after podcast got popular.
But you also worked. So you also worked with some of these more future forward, not the Lucid, Neo, Faraday Future, and Fisker.
Yeah.
Also in the context of Bosch.
Yeah, right. So it was in late 2016, I think, when I moved to the US. So we saw a growing market at the West Coast, right?
Sure.
With all of these startups. And I had been working with a lot of them already from Germany. And so back then, I remember I sort of pitched my own role and said, hey, we really got to build up our business there from the Bosch side. And so I was sent on an international assignment with Bosch, and moved to California. So I lived in Northern California, and we worked with all of these startups at that time. Some of them still exist, some of them don't no longer.
Lucid actually, I think in 2016 had a different name, right?
Achieva.
That's right. Yeah.
Neo was next EV.
Didn't Eric Bach? Did he come from Bosch?
Eric Bach, no, he came from an OEM, and I'm blanking on which one.
Okay,
yeah, but he's the head of technology at Lucid.
Right,
he's the CTO.
He's from like
Rawlinson's right hand man.
He's from like Mercedes or something.
So let me ask you something. I got a bunch of questions. We're running out of time in terms of sort of your view on this. And first of all, so we had Jim Farley on the podcast, CEO of Ford, and he's been in my ear a lot about Ed, you gotta look to the Nordics to look at EV adoption, but the one nobody in North America is paying attention to what's going on in China. And he told me this like 3 years ago. And yes, and when he told me, BYD had only just started to like hit the accelerator, to pass Tesla. But he also mentioned companies like XPeng and NIO. So, long story short, how screwed is the Western world, the Western auto manufacturers, the legacy brands, when it comes to Chinese car manufacturers?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I actually just recently you had an auto show in Germany, right?
Yeah,
in Munich.
IAA.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see just how many Chinese brands showed up there and showed up with pretty good product.
Yeah.
So
was
I'm
it
not
real quick? Was it mostly EVs, or do they have gas cars too?
all EVs.
Well, because you saw the article how China is now they still have massive manufacturing capability for internal combustion, and they're trying to dump them on Europe, and they don't have enough boats to ship them there because, like in Spain, there's still a market for a $19,000 internal combustion car.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it was always difficult for these new OEMs out of China to really be competitive in the space of internal combustion engines. Cars, but now with EVs, it's a different ballgame, right? Suddenly, it's a complete new game, and they're pushing into European market and the US market. So I don't know if I would say any of the legacy OEMs are screwed, but I would say there's definitely new competition coming up, and a lot of it was startups that were established in the US, but China is also pushing into these markets, and there's probably going to be this phase where you have a lot of players trying to establish themselves in the market, and some of them will, and some of them won't. So it's going to be a couple of interesting years ahead, I think. I mean, I'm super excited.
Yeah.
You mentioned,
Why are you excited? What are you excited?
Well, because he's not directly in that space.
No. Let him answer. What are you excited about? What are you excited about?
I'm excited because this is a unique time. It really is a unique time in history and in this industry, right? I mean, my whole career was about electrification from the beginning. And I remember even before I started my first full-time
your
job.
11-year career. Sorry.
No, you're right. Yeah. But even before then, I had internships, and I was a working student at Bosch and so on. So I was exposed to electric vehicles fairly early. Actually, when I was still in school, I remember seeing, I think, in 2000 or something, I saw a Prius for the first time. And I was like, wow, this is amazing technology, right? And then I actually had the opportunity to see a Tesla Roadster fairly early. Bosch had somehow procured one and got them to Germany, and that must have been 2009. And it was just amazing to see that. So for me, this has been the center of what I've been working on and interested in.
It's interesting though, because
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just seeing to finish that thought, seeing this industry now completely move, right? And look at the numbers now on electric cars that are being sold, and all of the legacy OEMs finally, bringing really great products to the market too. And now being in the middle of what I think is even greater to talk about trucks, electric trucks and fuel cell trucks. It's just amazing. And that's a once in a lifetime kind of shift of an industry. And that's just exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting to be part of that.
When I interrupted you, I was trying to say it's exciting because the old dogma is being torn up. Like I was recently up at Francis Ford Coppola's winery, and he's got the Tucker. He owns a Tucker, and it sits there in the middle of the winery. And I remember, back when Tesla was getting going, everyone said, you can't have a new car company. Look at Tucker, 1948.
It's the last one that launched.
Can't do a new one. Porsche was also 48. No one talks about that. But anyways, and they failed instantly, 51 vehicles. And since then, it's just all being torn up. Like, it seemed inevitable. Go ahead, Ed. That, gasoline forever, right? It just seemed, and then I was reading today, I think Ernst & Young, they did an analysis that, 2036, electric passenger car sales will pass hybrid and internal combustion in 2036. The U.S. is actually tracking a little bit ahead. By 2045, we'll only be 5 years behind the rest of the world in EV adoption.
I'd be surprised if I think it might accelerate even faster. But to your point, I think anybody who, and I think about this a lot, all the haters out there, you're like, guys, you can think about it one way. yes.
Yeah, car does not go boom, boom, boom. That's one thing it doesn't do.
We're in the golden age of internal combustion. Cars have never been this powerful or this efficient, but it's so exciting what else is going on in the EV space. It's amazing. But let me bridge that to software. Because I've been trying to push software-defined vehicles, SDVs.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
whole
you
thing.
should have seen the diagnostics on this truck.
No, he showed me. He walked me through. He told me that this truck is OTA.
Yeah.
But this really goes back to your time at Bosch. I went 2 years ago. One of the most obscure conferences I've ever been to. I went to AEK Ludwigsburg, which is. Have you heard of this? Okay, yeah.
I actually lived in Ludwigsburg before I moved to the US.
Boy, there's nothing going on in Ludwigsburg. Let me tell you.
Oh, cool. It's not that bad.
It's a beautiful town.
There's one Irish pub there.
Okay. But Ludwigsburg, so this is a conference of a bunch of European, mostly German supplier, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, and this is really focused on formerly electronic systems and now software.
Yeah.
And the two leading speakers are obviously going to be Bosch and then Continental, right? So these are one of the two largest German tier 1 suppliers, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I will tell you, and I went at this really unique time where that year they decided that the whole conference would be spoken in English, not German, thank God. So I heard all these things for me, all these presentations in German, and they were like no conference I've ever been to, very openly talking about how serious the software-defined revolution is. And the guy from Bosch basically said, if we don't figure this out, we're screwed.
Yeah.
And the thing that I had no insight into any of this, but like please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to give you a chance to speak. The thing is, Bosch and Continental, all these suppliers, they're really good at supplying the hardware. They develop the systems, the manufacturing process. They test everything. They sell it to the company, the OEMs. OEMs are really sort of just assemblers of these subsystems. They pay the bills. All this stuff comes in there. But up until like 5 years ago, hey, well, here's the bill for all the hardware. You want some software? Okay, we'll give you the software for free. And software is always an afterthought. And I'm talking to a guy at Lucid. He's like, and it was all terrible. None of these suppliers know how to code. Like this is trash.
Yeah.
And this is sort of the fundamental problem with EVs, as you're reducing all the parts complexity, you're taking away all the mechanical systems that the suppliers know how to work on, and it's all being driven by code. A lot of these companies are kind of going away, which is why I think you're being a little optimistic about some of the legacy car brands, because this is not just a supplier problem.
No,
this is a brand problem. So, did I misstate anything? Are you worried at all about the company that you spend a lot of time with? Is there any thoughts in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with most of what you said. That it's a shift. It's a shift in the industry, and yes, differentiation came a lot through hardware in the past, and it's going to be more and more through software, and not only like infotainment systems and little features that are can be fun, but just the whole experience of the car, including performance. You can just do so much more with control systems on driving dynamics and all of these active systems. So it's already extremely important, and it's gonna be more and more important.
Excuse me, my voice is going away. How many software engineers are there at Nikola?
I think so. Overall product development is a little of 400 people, and I think the group that does all of our controls, and I'm gonna talk about that here in a minute. All of the controls and hardware for controls is, I think, around 100 or so. So it's a good chunk of the engineers we have, and that was important for us from the beginning to really vertically integrate on the software piece. So we developed all of the main vehicle ECUs in-house, also the hardware, and then the base software and the application layer software. Because we agree, I guess, with what you said, that this is going to be important, and it's going to be a differentiator. And you need to be able to make over-the-air updates, and it's very difficult to achieve that with working with all of these different suppliers and integrating them. It's a nightmare.
Languages.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So that was one of the most important things. We said, nope, we need to own this, right?
And that's
we fully own the value stream now, from the concept to the architecture, the software architecture, to the implementation, and it's all done in Phoenix. It's all done in the same kind of building, right? And we have access to the vehicles directly, and we have very, very fast development and testing loops, and we can push it out via over-the-air updates and all of that mechanism in the back end be developed in-house as well. And that's going to be very critical going forward. And you are right that the legacy OEMs with all of the supplier integration will face a big challenge there. And they are.
Because that's sort of what, like, Tesla stumbled into that as a real advantage. But, like, these guys, Apple with the iPhone, as we talked with Doug Field about, like, they were very savvy about it. Like, we control the software. Like, you're not giving us a piece. Like,
No, they control it. They make it so that it's basically invisible. Like, they're building something that everyone else can sort of use as long as you play by their rules.
Like they're not getting a widget from Johnson Controls which has its own language on it that your software has to try.
And it's a black box, right?
Yeah.
And if a problem comes up, you don't know how to
and you can't update it. It's
debug it.
Literally, I had a conversation with Mike Bell from Lucid about how they're like, our guys figured out this problem delivered by a key supplier. They figured out in a weekend after being told from the supplier they couldn't, like, no.
Oh,
no problem.
I have a very similar story. So.
Okay, so let's get personal. You live in Arizona. You live
I do.
Close. Okay,
Yeah.
you got a family.
Yeah, I have a wife and 2 kids. Yeah.
Nice.
2 boys.
2 boys. Great. And they love it there?
Oh, they love it. We love it there, yeah.
And everybody's, your wife's German? Like you brought her over?
My wife's German, yeah.
Okay.
My kids are probably more American than German. They're both born in the US, and
that makes them more American, yeah.
they are very interested in everything American, and only so much in the German heritage, but
wait till they can drink beer.
You're welcome, and I'm sorry. What do you got at home? What are you driving?
My daily driver is a Tesla Model 3.
Okay. You like it? You criticize anything? You're like, oh boy, this ride is a little steel springs.
The car I had before was a Mustang GT convertible, stick shift.
But then the kids ruined that.
And actually, I had the car seats in there.
Oh, nice.
It works.
Okay.
It works.
Okay.
It's not as great to get them in and out, but it does work.
Yeah.
When they're little enough.
Yeah.
So it's obviously not that, right? But I would say it's the best daily driver I owned in my life. It's just such a great car.
Hard to fault.
I mean,
hard to fault from like a reviewing cars point of view. Which we kind of
not the car I would take on a track day. I would take a different car.
But people track them, and there's a whole industry for tuning them, and you get the performance version. Beat a lot of people.
Well, it's great performance, but that's where we're coming back to the vroom maybe, right? I mean, there's to me there's a little bit more than that. But for my everyday driver,
anything fun that you keep on the side, or maybe you have back at home, back in Germany? No fun cars.
No, I not at the moment. It's just been it's been crazy the last couple of years.
Sure,
developing this program. But in the future, we'll probably see if I can find some time for a fun project car. Yeah,
something with a badge from Stuttgart. Are you a fan of these cars, or
he's pointing at a Porsche for those of you listening.
I'm gonna come back to what I said before. It's always the things you can't have that you love, and I had this very defining moment when I was a kid, and I must have been maybe 11, 12 years old, and we were on lunch break in school, and we were in town getting something to eat, and this guy pulls up with a Camaro. And it must have been like a 70 or 71 Camaro.
F-body?
No, 70, 71 is way old.
It's older, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
And it was just awesome. And I mean, for me, that was the car I wanted to own, right? Going forward. And I grew up around Porsche and Daimler, Mercedes-Benz. And I mean, not the biggest fan of Mercedes-Benz, always been the BMW guy.
Oh.
Even though I grew up there.
Yeah.
Porsche are amazing cars. Absolutely. But again, I've been drawn towards American muscle for whatever reason. It's
good.
But I mean, I've seen, Sweden seems to be they're the most into it. But when like when a Camaro or a Corvette shows up at the Nürburgring, first of all, it's almost always a Swedish guy, and the people go crazy.
They do,
They
because
just
you don't
love
see
it.
these cars, right?
Right.
And now more and more, because now some of these models are actually offered for sale in Europe. That was not the
Mustangs,
case, right? So there was always special imports, and the mileage. I mean, the fuel economy was terrible, and the gas prices. So not many people really.
Also,
owned them, right?
the number of Germans I know that own Mustangs is in fact, I met.
It is a thing, yeah.
I met Boosie's Porsche's kid, Mark Porsche, who runs like Seat and Man Trucking. He has 2 Mustangs.
Yeah, it's funny because
and many Porsches.
all American automotive executives have a secret Porsche.
Oh,
like it kind of goes.
We could
goes the other
bust
way.
them. I mean, really, the amount of like board member type people I know. Yeah, domestic.
Have a
Yeah, it's
911.
ridiculous.
What
Yeah,
did you
or-
take
or a Cayman.
your driver's test in when you were in
This is
Germany?
Ed's favorite question.
That was a VW Golf, just like probably 90% of the people in Germany.
I would say, depending on age, it's either a Golf or a Scirocco. So older than
Oh,
you, they
yeah,
all
yeah.
had
That's
Scirocco's.
right.
And
So
That's
it'd be a 6th gen Golf.
No, that was
4th gen.
4th gen, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Ed and dates. Not
No, I don't know. Again, he's a good,
fourth
But I think you're aware of driving license and
Yeah,
driving tests in Germany. It's a little bit more involved. We
Yes.
actually learn how to drive.
Ouch.
Why? For what reason?
Come here.
What do you need that for?
Enjoy yourself. Well, listen,
Very
this
good,
was
yeah.
this was awesome. We covered a lot. Can you believe that was
What's the
well
one
over-
thing you didn't say about the hydrogen, Nikola, that you need to tell our audience?
Yeah.
I think we covered it pretty well, honestly.
okay. Cool.
I
For
think
more information, go to Nikola.
.com.
Does it go-
NikolaMotor.com.
NikolaMotor.com.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, well, Chris,
Hold on. The one thing
yes,
I want to say is
there we go.
experience it for yourself. And that's why we brought the truck, coming back to the very beginning of this. Experience it. I don't want to, I love talking, obviously, about our products. I really do. I'm very passionate about it. But I always encourage everyone, experience it for yourself.
Sure.
Get in the driver's seat if you have a CDL.
Or
a closed
not.
course. Or not.
Right.
Or take a ride. But experience what this is about. I don't want us to talk about it. I want us to deliver on the product and experience it.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Christian, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure to come here. So thank you.